Hey there, Tony here from Chronoforge Studios. Today's going to be a little bit different. We're going to be doing our very first tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be going over how to make a minimap in Unreal that can be 3D rendered with icons, or a stylized version.
The first step will be to create a sample project by going to the Games section, third person, and choosing the blueprint type and putting in the name of the project. Then click Create. Once the project's been created, we're going to create a minimap folder to hold all the minimap assets. Then we're going to go into that folder and create a new actor, blueprint class, and this is going to be called a_minimap camera, and then we'll go inside there. We're then going to go up and click Add, and add a scene capture component 2D. Once we have the blueprint open, we're going to go and change the projection type to orthographic and change the width to 2048 for now. I'll go into what the difference is with the projection later once I have it up and running, but for now we're just going to set these initial values. You're going to want to save and compile, then minimize this window, and then open up the level blueprint. Inside the level blueprint, we're going to override the begin play event, and what we're going to do is create an actor, spawn actor from class. We're going to choose the minimap actor, and we're also going to break this pin up so that we don't get an error, and it sets some initial values. The next thing we're going to do is actually promote this to a variable so that we have it for later use. So we're just going to call that the minimap actor. So another way to do this would be to actually go into the third person character and attach it as a component. But the downside to that is that if you ever wanted to move away from the character, then you'd actually have to do different things or detach it, and it'd get a little messy. So in my game, since you're able to move it away from the character when you're in the UI for hacking, I set it up in such a way that it's just going to follow the player, and then we can disable that later. So I'll show you how to do that now. So to make the minimap camera follow the player, first thing we're going to do is go into the minimap camera, remove these for now, drag off the event tick and get actor of class. Make sure we choose the single, and then we're going to choose the third person character, and we're going to promote that to a variable and call that the player character. We don't actually want to be doing this every tick, so what we're first going to do is go to get the player character and set this to a validated get, and then what will happen is if this is invalid, then we'll actually try to assign it. So the first time it's not going to be valid, it should grab it, find it, and set it, and then from that point on will be valid and be able to go forward. With the reference to the player character, we can now go in and get the actor location here, and we're actually going to break this up into its components, and also going to make a vector. Because essentially what we want to do is offset this so that it's above the player's head. So we're going to be adding something to that. Probably just add 1000 for now. And connect that here. And from there, what we're going to be wanting to do is just do a set actor location, which is going to set the minimap camera, its location, to the new target. And we just want to connect these pins now. So that should be connected to there. And then just clean that up a bit. The last thing we're going to do is just quickly add a cube here so that we can see where this thing is. Save and compile. We'll also save and compile this. Minimize, hit play. And we should see a cube up above there, following the player around wherever they go. Now that we have the camera following the player, the next step is to actually get that screen capture camera to render that information to a specific render target, which is basically like a text or an image that constantly gets updated with whatever that camera is seeing. So to do that, what we want to do is right click in the minimap folder and just type in render target, or start typing it, and then you just have to choose one of these. For our purposes, we're going to be using the canvas since we're going to be putting this as an image in a UI, but depending on your needs you might want to select different ones, and you'll have to do some research if you want to dig into that further. But for this tutorial we're going to be using the canvas render target, and then you'll want to name that. So we're going to do render target canvas and then just minimap. So the next thing I'm going to do is open up the canvas render target that we just created, and I'm going to change some of these values. So the way this works is the camera is going to capture everything that it sees and then map it to this render target at whatever resolution we set here. So the higher the resolution, the crisper it's going to look. I played around a bit and this actually looks pretty good at 1024 by 1024. You can obviously tweak this depending on your needs, but this should be fine for the mini map that we're doing. The other thing you're going to want to do is change this from its default to no map, since the UI is always going to be a fixed distance. There's no sense in having different resolutions for different distances. Let's save this out and close it, and then we're going to go into the minimap camera screen capture component, and we're actually going to set this to the render target that we just created, and click save and compile. The next thing to do is to go in and make sure that everything that we've set up is working correctly. So I'm going to minimize that and open up our render target. Then I'm going to hit play. And as you can see, as I run around here, the camera up top is capturing everything that it sees and putting it on the render texture. So the next step is to actually integrate this into the UI so it's in the top left corner instead of just looking at it through the window here. To add a UI minimap to the HUD, we want to start by minimizing this window, then right click and choose new blueprint class, and then search under all classes for HUD. Choose HUD, select, and then we're going to call this minimap HUD, and then save that. Next, we actually have to set this to be our new HUD component. So you want to find the third-person game mode and go inside there, and then instead of the default HUD you'll choose the minimap HUD, and then save this and compile as well. We can now close this and open up our, I'll minimize that, and then go back to minimap and open up our minimap HUD. Once inside here, we're going to go to the event graph, remove these, and what we're going to do is create a widget, and then add that widget to the viewport, and then hit save and compile. You notice we're getting an error here, so we're actually going to have to create a widget class to spawn. To do that, we're going to minimize this window and right click here, go to user interface and widget blueprint, and then choose user widget. We'll just call this widget blueprint minimap, and then save that as well. Save everything. Then we can go back into our HUD and choose mini map, and then save and compile again. To test that this is working, we're going to minimize this window once more and go into the widget, and we're going to pull an image down into here, save and compile, minimize this and hit play, and as you can see the HUD is basically taking up the entire screen, or the white image for our HUD. So our next step is to go back into the minimap widget, and we're going to remove this image, and now what we actually want to do is change how this is laid out. So we're going to use a grid panel, and then inside this grid panel we're going to add the image. This image that we added is actually going to be the minimap, so we're going to rename this to minimap image, because the render textures can be used just as a textured image inside here because we chose the canvas type. So I'm going to click on that, and then under brush here we just have to choose minimap. And it is still in the top left corner, so we want to go into the grid panel, and we're going to expand these out and make them take up the entire area for the column and the row. Then we're going to go into the minimap itself and make sure that it's in the top and right hand side. We're going to want to go in and change the image size to 256 by 256 to start with. And you're going to see it's right in the top right corner. So if we want this out a bit, we can set the nudge to move it out. So let's say -25 by -25. Well, actually 25 for now, to give it a bit of an offset from the outside. You're going to want to save and compile, minimize this, and hit play. And as you can see, it's actually not working correctly yet, and the reason for that is I actually missed a setting when I was setting up the scene capture component. The default is this inverse opacity, which won't let you see it correctly, so you want to set that to the final color. I'm actually going to be showing you the other method that I use in my game that gives you the depth and kind of like a stylized version of it. But if you just want to see the visual the same way your regular camera would see it, then you can just set this to final, save and compile, minimize this and hit play. And now you can see exactly as before, but it's a little mini map in the corner. The last thing we're going to do is get rid of this cube here because we don't need it to test anymore, which will get rid of that shadow. And that's basically the tutorial to see a mini map in the top right corner. The next step is to kind of make it more advanced and do the stylized version. So I'm going to get into that next. The first step in switching to a more stylized version of the minimap is to filter what objects are displayed on the minimap itself. To do this, what we're going to do is open up the minimap camera actor, click on the scene capture component 2D, and go down to the primitive render mode and select the use show only list. What this will do is make it so we have to explicitly tell it what objects we want to capture with this component. So we'll save and compile and hit play, and you can see there's just invalid data here. So the next step is to actually add things to that list. There are a lot of different ways to populate the list of objects you want to see in the minimap. For our purposes, what we're going to do is use the tag system to capture everything in the scene with a specific tag. But this is going to be highly dependent on how your game gets set up, how your levels are loaded, and how you want to build this. But for now, all we really need is a list of objects, so that's what I'm going to do for this one. So I'm going to start by selecting all the objects in the scene. Then I'm going to go to the details here and add a tag called minimap. Once that's done, we're going to want to go up to File and Save All to save all those changes to the scene. Then open up the minimap camera actor, and what we're going to need to do here is we're going to override the on begin play so that during the initialization of the level, when this is created, we're going to go through and do this. So what we want to do is look for actors, get all actors with tag. So we're going to get all the actors with the minimap tag, which will give us a list here, and then we're going to iterate through that list. So we'll do a for each loop. And then from here, what we want to do is get our reference to this and then do show only actor components, and we're going to hook this up here. So what this does is, if you read this, is it adds all primitive components in the actor to our list of show only components. So effectively what that does is when it starts, we get everything with this tag, loop through them, and then we just tell the scene capture component about them so that it can render them. And we can check this too to make sure all the child actors in there are working. So we're going to save and compile, minimize this, and hit play. And now you can see that the level is showing now because we've added all those components or actors to the scene capture, but the player actually hasn't been added. That's why you can't see them. So the next thing we're actually going to do is add an icon instead of the player to show how you can do that. Since I want to do everything from scratch, I'm actually going to go into Blender and create this icon real quick that we can use. So I'm just going to delete the camera and the light there, go into edit mode, and we're just going to delete some of these vertices, take these and delete 0. hide all these. Merge these vertices. Merge these ones. Alright, so, well, we can bring these in a little bit too. There we go. So we have ourselves a very simple icon for the player. Next, we're going to export this. So we go to File, Export, FBX, and we're going to choose player arrow for the file name. And then we'll just want the mesh and the selected object, and then export. We'll then go into the Unreal Minimap folder and import. Choose the player arrow from the location it was saved. Standard settings will be fine, and import that there. Then save all. Then we're going to create a new material. We're going to call this material m_player arrow, and open that up. And all we're going to do for now is to make, actually we'll do a 3 here, make a constant color, and we're just going to put that into the base color for now, and we'll make it green. There we go. The last thing we're going to do is to create a material instance here out of the player arrow material, and then we'll save that. Then we're going to go into the player arrow mesh. We're going to change this to player arrow instance, and there we go. We'll have our icon ready. From here, what we're going to want to do is go to the player character and add this to the hierarchy so that it shows up on top of the character. We'll actually want to adjust this so that it looks good and is facing the right direction. So it looks like we'll have to do 90 here, and let's lock this and scale it down a bit. Alright, that should be good. Save and compile. Now if we test this right now, what we're going to see is that the arrow actually shows up in game, which is something we don't want, and we're not seeing it in the minimap either, so we're going to have to address that next. To hide the arrow in game, what we want to do is open up the character blueprint, choose the arrow, and we're going to want to look for visible and check visible in scene capture only, then save and compile. And now when we test, we're not going to see it in game anymore, which is what we want, but it's still not on the minimap camera. To have it show up on the minimap, what we need to do is add it to the show only list here, the same way that we added all of the parts of the level. The tricky part is actually getting a reference to this arrow from the player character from inside this actor. There's a number of different ways to do that depending on how your game's structured and what gets initialized first, whether your player exists first or your minimap camera. But for the purposes of this tutorial, what I'm going to do is on the camera, when the player character is valid, every tick when it's valid, it's going through and updating the location. But I'm going to do a one-time init here, so that if it is valid, it goes through this code once, grabs that arrow value, sets it as the into the component list, and then kind of goes from there. But for your game, it could be completely different. But I'll start with this here now. We'll start by creating a branch, and then setting this to a variable, and we're going to call this init once. And we'll save and compile that. And it'll start as true, so it's going to go through here, and then the first thing it's going to do is set this to false so that it only goes through the one time. Then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this reference to the player character, since we know that it's valid, and we're going to get components by tag. This is going to be a static mesh component with the minimap tag. And then we're going to iterate through all these. There should only be one, but since this gives us an array, we can just make sure we get all of these. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our screen capture component, and so this time we actually have to choose component, since it's going to be a component of the character instead of actor. So we're going to choose the component version, hook that up, hook this up to the component. Now this isn't going to work right away because we actually haven't set our arrow to have the right tag yet. So we're going to add the minimap tag here. And we could actually just take the static mesh, just all of them, but if we ever add more static meshes, it might grab more. So we're going to do both the tag and the static mesh just to make sure we're only grabbing the parts we want. So if you wanted to, you could add more icons or other things here, and give them that tag if you want them added as well. So let's check this out and see how it works. So we'll minimize this and hit play. And as you can see, we do have that arrow. It's really small right now, and it's actually showing a shadow. So let's fix that first. So I'm going to jump into the character here, choose the arrow, and let's do a search for shadow, because we don't need shadows for this. So we'll do that and hit save and compile. The other thing we're going to do is actually we're going to make this visible real quick just so we can tweak the size. Let's scale this back up a bit actually. Let's try that. Go back to visible. Disable that. And let's check out to see how that looks now. Yeah, that looks much better. So it basically represents the player on the screen, the direction they're facing. You could also use this system to show icons for other things aside from the characters. So you pretend like these cubes were mining nodes. You could have little icons that represent those mining nodes instead of just seeing the cube there, as it would be in 3D. So there's lots of possibilities with the way this system works, but the next thing we're going to look at is actually stylizing the level so it looks different than just the top-down 3D view. Making a more stylized version of the minimap, similar to the one in my game Shadow Rasa, involves two major steps. The first is to make more simplified geometry that can be used for the minimap, and the second is to make a custom material that utilizes pixel depth to change the way the visuals are shown as you go up and down the levels so they fade in and out. Normally what you'd do if you want custom visuals for your minimap is to make custom 3D assets in Blender or whatever 3D program you use, but for this tutorial we're just going to keep things simple and duplicate the cubes that we have and then squish them down on the Z-axis to make it so that we can use these as those simplified visuals. I'm going to start by creating a base material for minimap parts. That's going to be used for all the parts of the minimap. So that'll be the walls, the various platforms, and everything else. So this is going to be the base. And we're going to go in here, and to start with, we're going to just make I held 3 and hit the left click to make a base constant color. And we're just going to set this to an orange value for now. Save this out. Then we're going to create an instance of this. Let's see, create instance, and we're going to call this mi minimap part for now, and then save that as well. And then we're just going to set this to that material. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through and do this for everything, but all I'm doing is going through each part, shrinking it down on the Z, and then adding this material to it. So I'll be right back when all that's done. Okay, so I've gone through and created all the minimap visuals by taking each component, shrinking it down on the Z-axis, then putting it on the top, and changing the material to the minimap part material. The only thing that I did that was a little bit different was for these slopes, I just took these longer ones, put them here, scaled them down to the right size, and then changed the angles so that they match the slope. But other than that, it's just copying all of the different parts and putting them on top. So the next step is to actually change the minimap to have the simplified visuals as the components in the show list instead of the regular actors. So we're going to do that now. To start with, what we're going to do is go in and select all of the actors in the scene and remove the minimap tag first. So grab all these and all these ones. And we have tag in our search box, so we have this up and we can just delete all those and then save everything. After that, what we're going to do is search for MM. I added this to the end of all the simplified visuals to indicate minimap. So we're going to go through and select all of these here. And we're going to re-add back the minimap tag. And then save it. We're also going to look for shadow and disable the shadows since we're not going to need those for the minimap, and save that as well. And then we're going to test that. And as you can see, now we're seeing just the simplified visuals, and it's really hard to tell everything apart. So the very next step would be to start to play with the materials and get this set up so that we can actually use the pixel depth to make things fade in and out. Let's open up the base material for the minimap part, and then we can add our pixel depth. Now the pixel depth is actually the distance, it's a float distance from the camera to whatever point the pixel is at. So if we just multiplied this base color by the pixel depth, it wouldn't really work correctly because the value is going to be much higher. It's always going to be at a max value. Since we want it clamped between 1 and 0 for each of these colors, this is going to be way outside that. It's going to be like 1,000 or whatever the distance is to the pixel. So we actually have to divide this first by a fixed amount, and that's dependent on how much of a range we want for the fade to happen. So just for testing purposes, we're going to go in and do 2048, and then we're going to see how that looks in here. So we're going to minimize this and hit play. And as you can see, it's a bit more faded now, and it should change depending on our distance, which it looks like it is. But it's still not perfect, so I'm going to go in and actually add an extra value to tweak things. Back inside the material, I'm going to add a subtraction node to remove some of the pixel depth, which will essentially let us dial in where the fade, this 2048 fade, is going to take place in. So I'm just going to connect these up here, and we're going to remove 1,000 from it, and then try that out. Save that. Okay, then we're going to go back in here, play, and this is looking a bit better now. It seems to be fading. You can see it fades up and down as we go, but it actually looks like it's the reverse of what I want. So instead of having it map from 1 to 0, we'll want 0 to 1, and there's an easy way to do that. We just have to go back into the material and do a 1 minus in here. So we'll do another subtract, and we actually want it the other way. So we want this here and this to be 1 minus this value, and that should look a lot better. So we'll try that out as well. Minimize this again, hit play. And this is looking a bit better. So we're gonna have to dial this in a bit, but this is a good start. And we also have to get rid of that light because we don't really want the light coming through in here. So that'll just take a moment as well. Back in the material, all we need to do to get rid of that light is go in here and change this from lit to unlit because we don't really need that extra light calculation. So I'm just gonna find that in here at the top. And then since there isn't a base color for that, we'll just use the emissive and then give that a try. So we'll minimize this window, click play, and the light is gone, but it's still not really perfect. So we're going to actually add some params or parameters to the material instance so we can tweak them and find something that looks good. So we're going to do that next. You'll want to open up the material again, and we're going to create some parameters here. So we're going to go off here and do a scalar parameter. I'm going to call this the player Z offset and leave it as a default value 0. We'll pull off here and do a scalar parameter. call this the max distance and set it to a value of 2048 as a default, and then save that out. Then we're going to minimize this and open up the instance of this material, and so that we can make some tweaks as we go, and then hit play. Okay, as you can see, it's kind of working, but we could tweak it a bit better. So we're going to hit F8, jump in here to the max distance, and enable these so we can tweak them, and then we're just going to move this around until we find something nice. So I think around 1300 here looks pretty good. So we'll set that in as a fixed number. Save that and hit F8 to go back in. And yeah, that looks pretty good. So it gets darker when we're higher and lighter when we're not as high. Yeah, so that looks really good. The last step is to make these parts that we could see here that we were using just so that it's good for debugging and visualizing. We're going to make these invisible like we did the player and other parts. So we still have all these selected. So I'm going to go in here and do visible. And we're going to do visible only in scene capture. And then save. Then when we go into play, we're still going to have our mini map here with the various shades and color. But we won't see those in scene anymore. One thing you are probably noticing is that there is a bit of glow. There's an orange glow to everything around here. That's because the minimap is still technically there, contributing to the light. So we should disable all the lights for both performance and so that it doesn't have any artifacts in game, unless you like that. But we'll do that real quick now. So to do that, we just have to go in here and search for light and disable effect. Dynamic light indirectly, effect distant field lighting. Essentially anything related to light we don't want enabled, so that it's not hitting any of the performance and not causing any weird artifacts in game. So we'll save that out and look around, and yeah, it's looking much better. The last thing you're going to want to do is open this up, maximize it again, and go into the capture component again for the minimap camera actor. And we're going to do a few things that are going to make it look a bit nicer and be a bit more performant. So inside here under advanced, you can actually go in here and turn off some of these things that are going to be captured. So we don't really need the atmosphere or SP, clouds, decals, fog, landscapes. And now, if you end up using these, you'll want to re-enable them, but for the most part, none of this stuff should be showing up in the end result. So I'm removing all those. And then now if we give it a try, do it on the main, you'll see that the background is black too, which is nice. It's not showing the sky coming through. So that looks much nicer. The other thing to note is that right now I went through and actually manually created all of the little visuals and added them to the top of all these pieces that are used for the mini-map. But in the end, what you'll probably want to do is create specific objects that are bundled together, so that whenever you add a piece to your scene, it'll already have those minimap visuals built into it. So all your actors and components and pieces can come in, even the characters and guards and doors will have everything they need. So when you place them in the scene, all the minimap stuff will be set up on that other layer, so it'll all just naturally work together. The way you would do that is to go in, and we're just going to take a quick example here, something like Cube 4 and its top piece, and you would just essentially parent these together. You could have them as actor or however you want, but now wherever this piece is moved, both of them are going to be moved with it to the new location. And you don't have to worry about setting everything up again, which is a really nice way to do it, and makes everything a lot more clean when you're putting scenes together. One thing to note about the UI element here in the top right corner is that it's effectively, from the UI's perspective in Unreal, an image. So if you look at the widget itself, you can see that it's just an image object. It goes beyond the scope of this tutorial, but anything that you can do with an image, inside tutorials that you find, you can do with this screen capture. So you could have a nice graphic around it, you can cut it, mask it, do all kinds of different things. So I'll leave that to you to research the different ways that you can go about doing that, but it's definitely something to keep in mind that effectively it's just an image, so you can do anything that you could do with a regular image with this render target. One other thing to note is that if you actually want to zoom in the map, all you need to do is go into the scene capture camera and change this value. So if we change it to, let's say, 1024, save it. It doesn't have to be power of 2, I'm just using it as an example. Then hit play. You can see that we're zoomed in really close, and everything still works as you would expect. And if we go back in and change this up to like something like 4000, the higher you go, the farther out you go. Then when we hit play, what you'll see is that we're zoomed out really far. So you can set this up however you want. I set it up so that when you want to go to specific value or certain zoom levels, I just have them hard coded, and then I lerp at a specific speed towards those to give that nice in and out. And then I also use a curve just to make it look a little nicer as you go zoom in and out. But that's all you really need to do if you want some zoom functionality inside your minimap as well. The way that I make the minimap bigger is just through the UI itself. I just go in and manipulate the image, as I talked about before. There are tutorials out there on how to manipulate images, make them bigger in the UI and smaller, so I'll leave that to you. But that's another really cool feature that you can easily implement. So those are all the things I wanted to touch on today. There are a few things to note, one of which is that in my game I'm actually going to only have a fixed height that you can go between. So the colors that I chose work well for that, but what you might actually end up having to do is to pass in the player's position and compare that to camera position to get the right gradient based off where you are. So no matter how high you climb or go down, that gradient is always going to look the same. That's one of the downfalls of this, but it's basically all the building blocks you need to start building a system like this, whether you want the 3D rendered stuff on your minimap, or a combination of 3D rendered and some icons, or a fully stylized system like this. And you can create all your own custom materials and add whatever you want to the other layers. So yeah, it's really up to your imagination how you go about utilizing these tools, but you're basically set to start going and making mini-maps of your own.
That's it for today. Hope you liked our very first tutorial. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.